Hey everybody, it's Pastor Rodney here. It's good to see you again. It's day 2 of our week-long journey towards Easter as we take a look at some Hebrew concepts, some Hebrew words that are found in the Old Testament that undergird our faith, especially our understanding of who God is and who Christ is, and obviously the impact and the influence and the power of the resurrection in our lives. And so one of the words that I want to look at today is the word prayer. And there's a lot of different words for prayer in the Bible. I mean, there's one that carries the idea of digging for treasure or digging for jewels. There's one that carries the idea of asking or begging someone to do something. There's one that has the idea of having a conversation or an interaction. But there's one word, and it's the Hebrew word tefillah. It is the focus that I want to deal with today, and I found that word in Psalm 69:13. But as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord, at an acceptable time, O God, in the abundance of your steadfast love. Answer me with your great and sure salvation. So, tefillah, although it has a wide range of meanings, basically it carries the idea of a process of self-evaluation and personal accounting and connection and contemplation with God. So prayer in this context is less about asking God for something and more about connecting with Him or yielding our lives to Him, our agendas and our perspectives to His. It's a time of self-judgment and evaluation. So when a person prays to God, when I pray to God, I must inevitably search my heart and examine whether or not my wants and needs and desires and conduct are in line with God's character, God's commands, and God's heart. If I realize what is true, and it's true in all of our lives, that we never completely measure up, we're going to be filled with humility when we come to the Lord, realizing that our lives don't always line up, and therefore when we come to God for any reason, we don't deserve to be there, but yet He welcomes us into that communion, that connection with Him because of His steadfast love, His hesed, which is another word that we're going to look at in a day or two. And so you catch the idea and the flavor of this when the Apostle Paul, who was a Jewish scholar, if you will, a Pharisee, when he says over in 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5, examine yourself to see whether or not you're in the faith. Test yourself, or do you not realize this about yourself, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless, of course, you fail to meet the test. I think that catches the essence and the flavor of tefillah. But the reason why I wanted to use Psalm 69 is just an interesting thing that I stumbled across. For those who walked with Jesus and talked with Jesus and saw Him do ministry and saw the miracles that He did and watched what happened, on the cross and of course with the empty tomb, they tie much of what they observe, much of what they hear, much of what they experience, they tie it to Psalm 69. Some examples of that, when Jesus chased the money changers out of the temple, the disciples remembered the words from Psalm 69:9. You find that over in John chapter 2. When Jesus spoke of the hatred that His followers would experience, He referred to Psalm 69:4. You find that over in John chapter 15. When Jesus was near death on the cross, He said, I'm thirsty, and someone offered Him vinegar or sour wine. And John understood that as a fulfillment of Psalm 69:21. You find that over in John chapter 19. And over in Acts chapter 1, when we have the account of Judas, that is understood as a fulfillment of Psalm 69:25. Paul makes a reference to Psalm 69 in Romans chapter 11 and in Romans chapter 15. And the earliest Christians would look to this psalm, and they used it as some kind of filter, some kind of way to think through all the things that they were seeing and hearing and experiencing with Jesus Christ. And so there's even a couple of verses in Revelation that cite us back to Psalm 69. So I think it's important for us to look at the concept of prayer in a psalm that was a reference to Jesus more than any other psalm in the New Testament. And as I thought about that, I want to leave you with a final thought. You remember when Jesus was in the garden. You remember when he was struggling and he was sweating blood, and his disciples weren't able to stay and pray with him. They were tired and falling asleep. The Bible says over in Matthew chapter 26 that he went on a little further and he bowed with his face to the ground, praying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." I think that's a perfect example of a prayer that includes tefillah. You see, Jesus, in his humanness, didn't want to suffer, but was willing to line up his life, his agenda, his future, his death to the will of God. He was willing to yield his will to his Father's will. And so you and I do the same thing. As we walk with him and talk with him and get to know him and experience life with Christ, we must interact with him and pray with him, not just going to him and asking for things, but allowing that communion and that connection be a time that is a time to reevaluate and reexamine and to sometimes correct some things in our lives so that our lives are more in line with the life of Christ. As someone much smarter and wiser said, we should all ask that the Lord continue to make our lives less and less and less about us and more and more and more about him. And maybe that's what the psalmist meant when he said, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." Hey, I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Hope this has been encouraging to you, and I'll talk to you later.